Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished scholars, distinguished participants, good morning. Dr. Watari, thank you for having me and Mr. Nazeri here at this very important meeting. I hope this is a very fruitful meeting and discussion in regard to different aspects of the issue. Okay, thank you. So, as it was mentioned, we are going to present this presentation under the title of Afghanistan under Taliban, Humanitarian Crisis and its impacts on education and research. So this presentation is prepared by me and Mohammad Hassan Nazeri. I will be trying to present, and at the end, if there is any question, we jointly will be respond to that question. So there is an introduction to this presentation. Of course, all of you know that armed conflict has a catastrophic effect on well-being of nations. Studies have shown that armed conflict causes more mortality and disability than any other major event and disease. It destroys communities and families and often disrupts the development of the social and economic fabric of nations. The effects of armed conflict include long-term physical and psychological harm to children and adults, as well as reduction in material and human capital. Death as a result of armed conflict is simply the tip of the iceberg. Other consequences include poverty, malnutrition, disability, economic and social decline, and psychological illness. The World Health Organization estimated that in the situation of armed conflict throughout the world, 10% of the people who experience traumatic events will have serious mental health problems, and another 10% will develop behavior that will hinder their ability to function effectively. The most common conditions are depression, anxiety, and psychosomatic problems such as insomnia or back and stomach ache. A World Health Organization review published in June 2019 that examined 129 studies of mental disorders in conflict-affected populations like Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, Cambodia, Rwanda, and many other countries, found that nearly 1/4 of these populations experienced depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, bipolar condition, and schizophrenia. The study, which included Afghanistan, highlighted the humanitarian imperative to reduce suffering and implement scalable mental health interventions to address this burden. The presentation that I'm present includes information about the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan under the Taliban. I will first discuss the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, and then in section 2, the impacts of the humanitarian crisis on education and research will be highlighted. The section 1 is a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has suffered over 43 years of continuous armed conflict since 1979. And 1 year after the Taliban take over power, however, the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is worsened. And as a result, the most social class of Afghanistan and different sectors are suffered. Each sector and everyone is affected to a great extent, of which some of them will be highlighted and pointed out uh, as the following. First, the collapse of economic system. This is the most significant impacts of aspects of the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. After Taliban seized the power in Afghanistan, the economy of the country was collapsed, and the international financial assistance that had covered the majority of the government's public spending for years has also been cut off. With the collapse of Afghanistan economy and sanctions imposed by international community, most people have lost their job opportunities. Now, the ordinary population of Afghanistan try to respond to their basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. According to reports in the field, probably more than 25 million people out of the country's population are in the urgent need of food. As you know, the population of Afghanistan is almost 35 million, but 25 millions of these people are suffering from food scarcity. This was one of the reasons that millions of Afghans left the country and took refuge to neighboring countries and beyond. There are millions of people who have been displaced inside the country. The situation for children is especially concerning. They are facing extreme hunger and being forced out of school into labor. Second, women's exclusion. Since August 2021, women have largely been excluded from the workforce, both as a result of the economic crisis and restrictions imposed by de facto authorities. In the public sector, exceptions were made in some cases for women working in health care and primarily schools, as well as for a very small number of civil servants. Limitations on freedom of movement negatively impacted other aspects of women's lives. It is mentioned that no woman can separately and individually move out of their homes. They need to accompanied by a man. So this is a kind of restriction on the movement. So it will be negatively impacted the other aspects of the women's lives also, including access to health services. The closure of many women's protection shelters left women at risk. Justice system established to deal with cases of gender-based violence are largely non-functional. The girls who don't go to school today are a generation that is missing their opportunity, a generation that loses its chance to study. Many of these girls faced forced or early marriage. They got married unintentionally. They wished to continue their education, study, and create a promising future for themselves. They were forced to get married due to social and economic pressure. As a result, their lives were completely turned upside down. If we see each of these in detail, we will realize how much the fate of human beings is acutely stuck in despair and darkness. Women and girls face notable difficulties since their freedom of movement is often disproportionately affected by insecurity. Gender inequality and discriminatory social norms also create major barriers for women and girls. Their access to health services is often determined by male members of their households and may be conditioned on the availability of segregated services with female staff and segregated infrastructure, such as separate gates and waiting areas. Third, discrimination against ethnic groups and religious communities of Afghanistan. This is another aspect of humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Under the Taliban regime, the ethnic and religious communities of Afghanistan have been sidelined from the scene of power and politics based on their religious beliefs and ethnicity. The Shiite and Hazara community of Afghanistan is one of these communities that has been systematically removed from the capital scene. At the same time, they have been under a series of targeted and systematic attacks by terrorist groups without any protection measure taken by the governing authority of Taliban, which has become a serious existential threat against the community. For example, on 38 September this year, an education center of Hazara community in Kabul was attacked by a suicide attacker, which resulted in more than 100 deaths and casualties of Hazara children. This was part of a sequence of targeted attacks against the Hazara ethnic group in Kabul. Since 2015 alone, the Hazara residing in Kabul's suburb named Dashtibarchi has recorded over 30 bloody attacks which have deliberately targeted and murdered hundreds of civilian Hazaras at education, health, and sports centers, as well as mosques, simply because of their ethnic belongings and religious beliefs. For now, a particular political and ethnic group has all the opportunities and resources of power and wealth at its disposal. The monopoly over the country's wealth sources and power poses a significant danger threatening Afghanistan's future. Afghanistan possesses essential sources of wealth, water and land and mining. The Taliban monopolized these sources of work and wealth production in Afghanistan and will further squeeze their monopoly in the future. In this way, most Afghan people will be deprived of these essential resources of life and wealth. Fourth, mental disorder. 41 years of war, violence, insecurity, poverty, and discrimination have had devastating impacts on the mental health of millions of Afghans. As a result of decades of bloodshed, many Afghans have sustained serious psychological traumas. More than half of the Afghan population suffers from depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, including many survivors of conflict-related violence. A 2018 European Union survey found that 85% of the Afghan population had experienced or witnessed at least one traumatic event, an average 4. Half of those surveyed had experienced psychological distress, with 1 in 5 Afghans impaired in his or her role because of mental health problems. Another 2005 study found that 67% of Afghans reported experiencing the devastating effects of trauma or other psychological conditions from the ongoing conflict, with the unemployed, older people, and widowed women particularly affected. A 2011 report published by the World Bank estimated that half of the Afghan population aged 15 or older has experienced depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress. In 2018, Human Rights Watch documented the enduring harm to families and communities from ongoing violence, insecurity, and economic hardship, including serious emotional and psychological trauma, and urged the government and donors to provide them support. Since August 2021, women have largely been Afghans who have Afghans who experience mental health and psychological conditions face a variety of hurdles to obtain services. The 2019 and 2023 National Mental Health Strategy of Afghanistan says that fewer than 10% of the population are getting the services that are available. The Afghan mental health system remains largely hospital-based and struggles to meet the demand, particularly outside of urban centers. World Health Organization estimates that to meet the health-related UN Sustainable Development Goals in low-income countries such as Afghanistan, a minimum of 23 health professionals, doctors, midwives, nurses, are needed per 10,000 inhabitants. But according to 2016 Public Health Ministry figures, there were only 4.98 professional health workers per 10,000 inhabitants, with WTO figures showing that the number of physicians is as low as 0.6 per 10,000 inhabitants in rural areas in comparison to 7.2 in urban ones. These were the humanitarian crises that Afghanistan communities are facing with. Now, the second section is the impacts of the ongoing humanitarian crisis on education and research. Education is critical for human well-being and a nation's growth and development. During the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, from 2001 to 2021, the education system in Afghanistan improved significantly. So this is the pre-Taliban era, from 2001 to 2021. During this time, the education system of Afghanistan improved very significantly. According to a report, 8.92 million students, 3.38 million of whom were females, were enrolled in 15,572 schools in the 2012 and 2013 academic year, which was a remarkable achievement compared to pre-2001 era, where we had less than 1 million students enrolled in schools. As of June 2020, there were 172 higher education institutes in Afghanistan, of which 39 are public and 128 are private universities or higher education institutions. In 2020, 53 of the total student population of 422,000 students were enrolled in private universities and institutions, while 46% were enrolled in public institutions. It means that private institutions were enhanced and improved significantly during these 2 decades. The emergence of Taliban as the governing force has put all the achievements related to education in serious risk. It has created great concern among the people, and in particular among the lecturer and students. Women fear that they will never be able to attend high schools and universities. In addition, foreign aid from the international community, including the United States and NATO countries and International Monetary Fund, stopped coming in. Education and research have been affected in Afghanistan in different ways. Some of them will be highlighted here. First, brain drain. During the last 2 decades, the human capacity of Afghanistan education system improved significantly. Most of the professors and teachers were at the PhD or master's level, having the knowledge and experience of Western countries. After Taliban came to power, estimates show that the half of the professors and teachers have left or are leaving the country. The country's universities in Kabul and beyond, such as Kabul University, Herat University, and Balkh University, are badly affected by brain drain. The educated classes leaving the country into fear of the likely tough policies and regulations related to higher education by the Taliban. The educated and cultured groups of the country, in addition to security and livelihood, need an accessible environment in which they can freely study, think, and express their product of their thoughts. They can teach, speak, write, deliver speeches, and express their views in the society. These opportunities, however, were lost for this group, and therefore they have mostly left Afghanistan and become displaced around the world. Second, academic freedom and institutional autonomy. The higher education sector in Afghanistan experienced, at least for a short time, a significant degree of academic freedom, flexibility, and freedom in curriculum development and the participation of women. Significant efforts were made to enhance academic freedom and institutional autonomy. The sector suffered significantly from a lack of academic freedom and institutional autonomy under the Taliban rule and due to volatile political situation. Taliban have asked all private universities to coordinate their hiring of professors with a special unit in the Ministry of Higher Education, and that professors working in public universities are banned from working elsewhere during occupation hours. Following the Taliban in higher education, men and women will be separated, and female students must follow a dress code, a special dress code. The Taliban have shown that they have a tendency to dismiss or put pressure on the current teachers in order to replace them with their own staff who have graduated from religious schools in Pakistan. The Taliban have begun not only to interfere in the university's process of recruiting, but also to send their people to watch and enforce their rules in institutions of higher education, including public and private institutions. Third, freedom of academic subjects. The freedom for universities to determine what subject offered and the specific academic environment. Taliban has already demonstrated that they will not allow subjects they perceive to be in contradiction with Islam and Sharia to be taught. It is said that comments have been made by the Taliban about removing or changing some of the academic subjects and education fields that are not in line with Sharia. Especially action is being taken to cancel courses perceived to promote Westernization and democratization. Music classes are already removed from the Faculty of Arts in Kabul University and others. Musicians and art groups are also removed from society. They shut the doors to their education, university, school, and everything related to music and art. Those who have worked in music and art and invested their life in this field but removed from the scene of Afghan culture and literature. Fourth, female access to education. Afghanistan education sector was rebuilt in the decade following 2001, so that millions of students were attending schools and universities across the country. As mentioned above, only in 2012 and 2013 academic year, about 9 million students, 338 million of whom were female, and 15,572 schools. Since taking over of Afghanistan in August 2021, the Taliban has banned girls from secondary education, and the vast majority of provinces are banned from most employment. Women in universities face harsh new restrictions. Many female teachers have been dismissed. The Taliban's ban on girls studying at high school become a de facto ban on university degree for women if it stays in place. From the Taliban perspective, even a gender mixed education is at odds with the Islamic principles and national values of Afghanistan. The Taliban's new Minister of Higher Education declared the end of a mixed gender education in Afghanistan. They appointed non-academic persons in academic positions. They have sent enforcers to universities and prevented women from participating in leadership roles and academic positions, which present a grim and disappointing picture of the situation. Fifth, radicalization of higher education. This is the most concerned aspects of the impact of current situation in higher education system and at all in education system. The Taliban continue with their agenda of Islamization of the country's education system. The February reopening of gender-segregated university classes brought opportunities, but also new challenges. There are well-justified concerns that the Taliban reopening of universities will simply create more opportunities for radicalization and the teaching of Taliban orthodoxy. Already, the Taliban have increased the national recruitment of classes focused on Islamic civilization. Already, the Taliban have increased the national requirement of classes focused on Islamic civilization from 1 or 2, depending upon degree, to 24. Before Taliban came to power, we had Islamic education in different courses, but after Taliban came to power, they increased the requirements of classes focused on Islamic civilization to 24. These courses, I mean to 24 courses. These courses are replacing our vital courses in all disciplines. The Taliban awarded that every district have a government madrasa. Faculty and students in fear of the authorities are increasingly self-censoring. Those in the classroom fear being reported by informants. And of course, in a few years, if girls are banned from secondary school, there will be no women in Afghanistan universities. Therefore, the long-term future of education in Afghanistan is dark. As I mentioned, this is the most critical aspect of the Afghanistan higher education. If it is continuing like this, so the extremist groups in Afghanistan will be strengthened more, because we are in the fear of changing the university in which they are teaching extremist values, which will be very dangerous for Afghanistan and also for the world. Conclusion. In 1 year after the Taliban takeover of power, and as a result, the most social class of Afghanistan and different sectors, including health and education systems, are suffered and affected. Education system in Afghanistan is facing serious challenges and shortage. It is vulnerable to political fluctuations, as well as to weak and corrupt governments, widespread poverty, and dysfunctional economy and poor governance in Afghanistan have exposed the sector to diverse problems. The relative but promising growth of the sector after 2001 has been one of the Afghanistan's great achievements. The unexpected rise of the Taliban to power in 2021 put the education at great risk. With the return of the Taliban to power, the hope for an educated middle class as well as growth and development in the country is fading away. I would like to highlight that this is only an example of a war-torn country in the world. All nations who have been facing with armed conflict, they will be facing with such a kind of problem. This is an example, and all affected, all armed conflict, all countries who have been faced with armed conflict, they will be having such a kind of problem. Recommendations. Even though this presentation was focused on impacts of humanitarian crisis on education and research, but as this meeting is mostly focused on health sector, particularly of mental health. So I will be having some recommendation on health sector, and then I will be having some recommendation on education. Health sector. Of course, in this recommendation, I'll be calling on Germany and international community. Germany and international community should support public health ministry of Afghanistan. Why I am saying public ministry of Afghanistan? Because it is the non-political organization. So we need to have such a kind of ministry, and we need to strengthen this ministry to function better. So we ask Germany and international community support public health ministry of Afghanistan to improve mental health education, support government efforts to develop mental health services, including confidential psychological counseling by phone that target underserved women and girls. As I mentioned, this is the problem of the women and girls, that they have less opportunity to achieve the to have health services. So if we have confidential it would be much helpful for women and girls. And third, support public health ministry effort to increase the number and professionalism of psychological counselors and trained health workers, community health workers, nurses, midwives, doctors, who can educate their communities and clients about mental health, perform psychological first aid, provide basic psychological counseling, and provide referral as appropriate to mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists. Education sector. Recommendation is that Germany and international community agenda with the Taliban and work to keep the education sector. This is very important. Germany is having good contact with a good relation with Taliban government and also United States and United Nations. My recommendation is that while Germany government is talking with Taliban, the education system of Afghanistan should be discussed, should be considered as an agenda, and Taliban should be asked to keep the education sector upright. The other recommendation is that Germany provide more scholarship program for education and research, as well as strengthen the partnership between Afghan and German academic institutions. Before Taliban came to power, we had different and many scholarships from different institutions of Germany for Afghanistan. And also there were partnerships between Afghan universities and German academic institutions. But unfortunately, after the Taliban came to power, all the scholarships programs canceled. So my recommendation is that the government of Germany and also education institutions provide scholarships program for Afghanistan young generation. The other recommendation is that Germany initiate an online platform or academy for sustaining the female education in Afghanistan. Now there are efforts in different countries that they are trying to initiate some online platform for Afghan students, particularly Afghan females. So Germany also can be involved in this and help us to initiate an online platform for Afghanistan girls and women. The international community, including the German government, should take urgent and sufficient measures to guarantee respect for human rights and women's rights. The female lecturers and students are faced yet again with the significant violation of their basic human rights, including their right to an education and to work. Therefore, the diplomatic pressure on the Taliban regime should be kept alive and exercised in an effective way. So this is our recommendation, that the diplomatic pressure should be continued against Taliban to respect the right of Afghans for education and also for accessing to health sector. So this was my presentation. Now, if there is any question, I'm at your disposal. Thank you.